The hero is within, and we are all the heroes. And so we unite with people all over the planet in knowing that there's only one magnificent hero within all of us, and that's the I am that I am. I don't know, was anyone here able to see a little bit of Reverend Nirvana's memorial service on Friday evening? So it was long. It was 3.5 hours, but it was beautiful every minute of it. At one point, Akili Beckwith, Michael Beckwith's brother, got up there, and I don't know the context of the story, what he was sharing, but he was talking about a conversation he had been having with Reverend Nirvana, and clearly he felt like his journey hadn't been a hero's journey. There was something that other people were heroes, but he wasn't. And Nirvana was saying, no, your journey just looks different. It's unique. Every hero's journey. So the hero is within all of us, but it looks different for everyone. And I loved what Nirvana said, and he said, and you hit the mother lode before you even started. You're made in the image and likeness of God. That's it. That's the essence and the heart. And so as we're going through these 12 patterns of the hero, these are all aspects of this one life that is always who we are all of the time. What these 12 patterns are, as I have mentioned before, is that these patterns have existed. Empires and civilizations have risen and fallen, but these patterns have stayed. So what that tells us is they're patterns that are coming directly from Spirit. So they're very similar to qualities of God. A lot of times in New Thought, we talk about qualities of God: love, peace, beauty, harmony, abundance, joy. These archetypes are the same idea. We're looking at aspects of God. And as we develop and go into them, we are fulfilling and becoming more richly fulfilled in these beautiful, in the multidimensional presence that God is. And how we each do it will be different. So even as I'm talking about these general patterns, they will look uniquely as all of us. In the reading today, Jim gave a very brief overview of the hero's journey, which is the preparation, the journey, and the return. Last week and this week, we're talking about the preparation. And when I first heard the preparation, I thought it was like preparing to go on a journey, but what that actually means is we need to develop a sense of self, a strong sense of self before we go off on the journey. So if you go off on the journey and you're less likely, it's going to be a much more difficult journey if you don't have a strong sense of who you are. So in psychology, in the developmental stages, a big part of becoming who we are is called the individuation process, really discovering who we are as a unique self. That, in fact, we need to develop an ego self before we can transcend the ego self. A baby has no sense of themselves yet. They need to develop a sense of themselves before they can transcend themselves. So that's really what this preparation is about. Excuse me. So last week we talked about the innocent and the orphan. The innocent archetype pattern, their main gifts are trust, having dreams, and positivity. So the innocent will have a dream, and they believe in it, and they trust that the universe is good, and it's going to happen. That's the innocence, and they hold on to that. The orphan is someone who is able to feel their wounds. We all have wounds. The orphan has the heroic quality of the orphan is able to feel it, and in feeling it, start developing connections with other people who've also felt those wounds, so they develop interdependency, so they're not isolating. So it's trust, it's interdependence and empathy that comes with an orphan. And as we develop both of those, I'm calling them sort of pairs, yin and yang, that we need both of them. Then we have the divine child archetype. That's the bridge of those two married together within us. The two movies we used last week were Eddie the Eagle and the orphan was When a Man Loves a Woman. This week we're talking about the other two main archetypes to develop a sense of self, and that's in the adult world, ones that we're all familiar with, the warrior and the caregiver. When those two are fully realized, and we're going to talk about that today, what these look like when they're fulfilled, when they come together, the divine child is the infant and the orphan, innocent and the orphan, the warrior and the caregiver together is Mother, Father, God. We all have that essence. Many of us grew up with that tradition of a parental God. So that's fulfilling that. So traditionally, the warrior was the masculine energy, that would go out and take care of business in the world, would go out and provide for the family, would go out and fight battles and hopefully make the world a better place and bring back the bacon. And the caregiver was the feminine energy, was home, nurturing, raising children, caring for them, teaching them so they grow up to be healthy adults. So those are the traditional roles. And in the modern world, that's more expected to be shared now. Both women and men are out in the workplace, and both women and men are at home nurturing and raising children together. So there's a marriage that's already beginning to happen, an expectation that we are both warriors and caregivers. So you're going to, on the one hand, feel that these two, for me, are the most familiar for me of all the 12 archetypes. At the same time, just by being with it, I have had some new insights, and that's what I love about these archetypes. It helps us get a little bit richer. So I'm going to start with the caregiver archetype. And since many of us, not all of us, but many of us in the women had that caregiver archetype more naturally, not always, but the feminine energy often goes towards the caregiver. I want to talk about the negative aspect of the caregiver. And the reason why is because the first movie that when I thought of caregiver that came to my mind was this movie Marvin's Room, which came out in the 1990s. It was with Diane Keaton, Meryl Streep, Robert De Niro, Leo DiCaprio, and it was a great cast. But I had a negative memory of it. I remember it was about caregiving, so I couldn't remember why. So I went back and watched it. And of course, it's a great movie, only because it's a great cast. They're fantastic. And Meryl Streep's character was the sister who is not the caregiver. And I'm watching, I'm like, oh, she's the orphan who hasn't dealt with her wounds yet. It's great to start applying this to all the stories in the life around us. Which reminds me, in the past, I want us to do both things. How does this apply to me? But also think of the people in your life, your family members, the people you work with, your friends, stories that you've heard. Start applying these archetypes just because it's all these. My point about these archetypes being around through civilizations rising and falling is they're very alive. They are very alive in the world. And so start seeing it, seeing how people are vibrating with different places and maybe are not developed in other areas. It really helps with understanding of how God's showing up. So Diane Keaton plays the caregiver for her father, who's immobile. He's in his bed. And she's been a caregiver for 20 years. And then she gets leukemia, so Meryl Streep, the absent daughter for 20 years, because she didn't want to be a caregiver, comes to help her. My challenge, even though the movie is good because the characters are good, it was clear I knew exactly why it left a negative impression, because it was so unrealistic. They had Diane Keaton, who had been nothing but a caregiver for 20 years. Oh, it's so wonderful. I love these. It's been so wonderful taking care of my dad, who can't talk, for 20 years, and my aunt forever how many years. It was the most fulfilling, I'm so overflowing joy. They showed her having no friends. She had no love interest. She had no hobby. She had no other interest, but she was very fulfilled and happy. And I thought at the end of the movie, I'm like, I bet a man, I'm sorry, man, but I'm like, I don't think a woman would have written that way. So of course I had to look, and I was right. Because it just seems so like such an idealized version of what a caregiver is, because anyone knows who's done caregiving is it's exhausting, it's tiring. We need to be filled. So the low level of caregiver is that caregiver who doesn't know how to take care of themselves. The place where we want to flesh this archetype out and fulfill it is remembering that we cannot really give much care to other people if we are not first taking care of ourselves. We have to learn how to do self-care and start with that, not just fit it in like they're the most important and I'm going to fit mine in. No, I start with me. I start with taking care of myself. And from that place, I have the overflow to give to others. And then I can enjoy giving to others. I feel the joy of giving to others because I'm not running on empty. What often caregivers do, one of the things I really liked about both of these archetypes that really showed the maturity in both of them is choice. She said, someone who's a natural caregiver wants to take care of everybody and everything. That's just the natural, I like to serve. I do get joy from, I'm not saying I, and all of us, that caregiver archetype saying I I love to serve. It brings me joy. So I want to make everyone happy. And it's not just because I don't care about myself. I just legitimately like taking care of people and helping raise them. But I can't do everybody. So eventually the mature caregiver learns to make choices, saying, I have to sacrifice. I can't give to everybody. So I have to focus in on what I'm going to give care to, where I'm going to put my time and my attention, and trust that someone else will take the other missing areas. So she was talking about in the traditional, the mother often took care of everybody in the family in the ideal traditional home. And what we're learning today in the caregiving role is everyone needs to take their part in a home life. That it's not just one person who's doing everything for everybody. That everyone has a role to play. Everyone chooses what is the area that I'm going to serve in. And that starts to bring a much more healthy caregiving energy to the whole environment. When I was at Agape, we had a pastoral care ministry, something back in my head for us here. And the pastoral care ministry, because there's so much to serve in pastoral care. There was grief support, there was crisis support, there was visitations, there was animal kinship ministry. There were so many different levels, transition of support. So everything had a team. You had to first choose. You couldn't join the pastoral care and be all of it. You had to pick one area of here's where I'm going to serve. And so I was the head of the visitation team. So here's how it worked. I had certain people on my team that went and made the visits to people who were in the hospital. Those people who went to visit people in the hospital, they had to have someone taking care of them. So before they went to visit, they had to call their person to pray them up. They would go make the visit, they would come back, and then they would get prayed up again. And then I was there to help the people who were praying them up, and then I was supported by the people who were running the ministry. So it was this incredible, incredible spiral of care and nurturing that was just extraordinary, because there was a recognition that we can't do it all, but every person needs to be taken care of, that we all need to not just, so we all need that care as well. And that's when healthy caregiving becomes a joy, where we look forward to it because we know we're not going to get depleted, and we feel the joy of being of service to others and taking care and help nurture and raise people. I like that she was saying it wasn't just about nurturing, it was also about helping raise, having people learn how to take care of themselves, teaching children how to take care of themselves. We don't just enable them, which is the unhealthy version. We support them in learning how to take care of themselves. So it's an incredibly rich world of caregiving, and we have to make sure we do it in a healthy way. And we also, as a society, need to value it, because I think we all know that generally the caregiver position is not as well valued as the warrior position. When we talk about warriors, we could come up with 1 million heroic stories of warriors because we really idolize and value the warrior. I just read a beautiful it was just beautiful, the gold medal winner for wrestling, they were asking her about, and she said, the hardest part for me is my coaches to me are incredible caregivers. She said, my coach has been working with me. My parents have sacrificed so much. They don't get this medal. They don't get all the attention. I get the attention. She's the warrior, right? And the caregivers, the ones who've been supporting her and helping her and nurturing her, she said, they're the invisible. They don't get all the attention. They don't get all the excitement. And she goes, I want to share everything with them so they feel rewarded and blessed too. So let us always remember to honor and see and value those people who are doing caregiving, because I think so often it is an invisible role in our world. But certainly I know as a parent, when I drop Julian off at school, I trust that his teachers are going to be taking good care of him. And they're of high quality. Nurses, all those people, coaches, the people who are in the background who aren't out being seen. So that's caregiving. The yin yang. I never know which is which, but they're complementary. So one's black, one's white, and they complement. They're one. So the warrior, we'll start with a low-level warrior, and then as it matures, the low-level warrior wants to conquer. They want to take over. They want to prove that they're right. That's the low-level warrior. And what she mentions, when they haven't done their work, they like to battle everybody. Like everything's a battle, because that's how they discover what they think about things, is to oppose. And I had a lot of that energy growing up. Not me. In my family, I was the caregiver, but there was a lot of warrior energy in my life. Even my mother actually had a lot of natural warrior qualities. And so there was a lot of debating when I grew up, arguing. And I've also seen how we've all matured as we've gotten older. And the maturity is to realize you choose your battles. You don't have to argue about everything. And as we mature, we don't even want to argue about everything. We start saying, what's really important to me? What are the values that I have? And start really, those are the values I want to go out and defend, or I want to stand for and make waves about. If I want to change the social justice system, if I want to change something in the world, that I'm going to choose my battles. I'm not going to battle everything. There becomes a maturity in that. So the warrior does two things. It goes out and it stands for principles, and it creates healthy boundaries so people, and it's inward too. We create healthy boundaries for ourselves, for my own self. So I take care of myself. I have healthy boundaries about what I'm willing to do and what I'm not to do. And we get very dysfunctional or unhealthy if we don't have healthy boundaries. And then we do it with other people. Healthy boundaries. So that's what the warrior energy does. My mom why I say she was a warrior, that came I think she would have led a completely different life if she grew up in a different generation. Creating boundaries was effortless for her. We were so clear about the boundaries in our home life, the structure, 3 meals a day. This is what I knew. I could tell you exactly what was on our plate. We had a green vegetable, we had a yellow, and we had a meat. It was very clear, and she never wavered. Or once in a while, she had some flexibility, but it was very clear. We didn't mess with her. And it didn't even occur to me. We were allowed 2 cookies at lunchtime. Now, she likes to save money, too. She was frugal, so she would buy cookies if she had a coupon. So we had a cupboard full of cookies. Not once in my entire childhood did it ever occur to me, not even dawn on me, that I should ask for a 3rd cookie. Never dawned on me. You had 2 cookies, that was it. And I just... And the discipline was an issue. She was very clear what her boundaries were, and if you crossed them, this was the follow through, this was the consequence, and that was that. It wasn't emotional. It wasn't how she was feeling. She was steady and consistent. And what that gives, what the warrior offers to us, I was just giving a feminine version of the warrior, is a sense of total safety and security. We knew what to expect every day. Not only every day, I knew how the holidays were going to go. I knew how summer vacation was going to go year after year after year. We had this steady sense of how life was going to be. And for a child growing up, that warrior quality of being able to create very healthy boundaries, very clear rules and guidelines was so warm. It felt nurturing, but in a different way than emotional. I'm a natural caregiver. I had to learn the warriors. And I remember I was working with teens, and I was working in a psychiatric hospital where boundary setting was really important. I had the hardest time, so I had to keep saying, what would my mom do? What would my mom do? Because it wasn't natural to me. That's what I really understand. There's natural instincts, and then we develop the others. So the movie that I used for the warrior was The Insider. I think it seems appropriate for today because there's so much wariness and lack of trust for big corporations, GMOs, food industry, education, justice system, politics, prison system, CIA, NSA, that the warriors aren't just the people in the military out protecting us in the world. It's also the warriors who are willing to stand for a principle who are in these corporations. So in this Insider was how many of you have seen The Insider? A few of you. Yeah, it came out. I haven't seen as many movies recently, so I keep going back to the 90s. So he was a scientist in the tobacco industry, and his job was to make cigarettes less harmful. And what he was discovering through his research was that this particular tobacco company, whose name I'm forgetting right now, his name was Jeffrey Wigand, and he found out through research that they were actually putting things in the cigarettes to make them more addictive, that they were intentionally trying to get people addicted to cigarettes. So they let him go because he wouldn't participate in this. And he had signed a confidentiality agreement. And then they realized he might speak about what he knew. So they tried to make it even more intense, and he wouldn't go along with it because they were trying to back him into a corner. And with that, he pretty much, by being willing to speak to 60 Minutes, the news organization, as a whistleblower, that decision that the American public, because they had set the 7 CEOs of all 7 tobacco companies get up and swear that they knew that there was nothing wrong with cigarettes. And he said, no, they lied in court. And for that, for standing for principle, for saying what they were doing, he lost all his money, his way of life. He couldn't get hired by other jobs. He ended up being a high school teacher, and the kids voted him Teacher of the Year for the state of Kentucky. He lost his wife. He lost the things that he loved to do. I mean, can you imagine, just by willing to stand up your principle, that you're willing to lose the money, the way of life that you're used to, your house, your wife, and she took her kids, and they were, I know they were threatening about health insurance because his children had health issues. I don't know how that turned out. I wasn't clear about that one in the movie. But that's what a warrior will do. A warrior will say, this is what I believe in, and I'm willing to risk losing those things that I hold precious in my heart to stand for what I believe in. That's an incredibly powerful, and I think that's why we celebrate it, because we recognize that people, Martin Luther King's kids, were threatened all the time. They were going to be killed, and yet he still stood for what he believed in. That's how powerful that warrior energy is within us. What is a spiritual warrior? I thought of this because there was a lot of that talk at Reverend Nirvana's memorial service. And I remember having a friend who I've mentioned before who considered himself a warrior, a spiritual warrior. He told the truth no matter what. So people would come to him and they would try to waver out of things. He'd say, no, that's not the truth. The truth is, da-da-da-da. You are abundance. You can pay for this. And if you're not a bank, there's something in you that's out of alignment that you can pay for this. And he would tell them the truth. And often he made enemies doing this. I actually kind of liked it. I liked people telling me the truth. And I also recognized, so I had him in my life to tell me the truth. He's the one I've said before who always used to kick me in the butt. You are not small. You are not little. You are a powerful being of light, and I'm not giving you any compassion. I'm not nurturing that small self of you. But I also had a practitioner who was all compassion. I don't think she really developed her warrior side. So I would hear him, and I would recognize the truth, but I would feel bad about myself. So I go to her and get all loved up. So I had a team. Like he'll tell me the truth, and then she'll tell me I'm lovable. So and it's something I've really been conflicted around, because Ken Wilber, who's a modern day philosopher, talks about how we're too spiritual teachers today are too wimpy. We're too nice. We don't speak the truth about people. And he comes from an Eastern tradition, in the Buddhist and Hindu traditions, where the teachers were very hard on their students. Sometimes violent, but would be very hard. Your ego's out of control. And the idea was people's egos were in control, and they would sort of slap the ego down to give space for spirit. So I've really struggled. And so I was working with that energy of just being more strong and my own warrior energy. So but it doesn't always feel good, even as, so, and I definitely didn't like it when my friend told me the truth. So I just been wondering about that whole thing. And it was this conversation about warriors and caregivers and listening to Reverend Nirvana's memorial. And it's so clear who he was, and it made me realize something. Because there was, and I've talked before about Reverend Nirvana, but for those of you who aren't here, one of my initial experiences was feeling very small and insignificant, and him just standing and telling me who I was, and just this love pouring over me. Getting a hug from him, I'm like, oh, this is what a God hug, this is what it must feel like to be hugged by God. It was transcendent. It was beautiful. But Nirvana was also a truth teller. He was going to tell you the truth. He wasn't going to waver. And I was thinking about that, and I remembered a time in a ministerial class. There's about 12 people in the class, and we were talking about some issue, and I remember the point I was making, and I'm not going to get into it because it's a whole other thing. But I was making a point, and I was upset because I'm like, what I'm saying is true, and people are not hearing me, and it's upsetting me because they keep telling me it's my issue, and this isn't my issue. This is something that I'm seeing out in the world that needs healing. And it's not that I was wrong, but he turned to me and he said, you could be right, Harriet, but the problem is, the reason why people aren't hearing you is because you haven't embodied it yet. You need to start doing work on yourself so you embody that. It might take several years so that when you speak about it, you know that you know that you know. But right now, you're trying to convince everybody else because you're still trying to get it for yourself. He was strong about it. He didn't say, well, maybe it's this, Harriet, or perhaps it's this. He's like, no, this is it. And I was thinking about that this morning. I thought, I didn't feel diminished. I didn't feel embarrassed. I didn't feel put down because he was that marriage of warrior and caregiver. I knew, and it wasn't even an intellectual knowing, I knew in my whole being that he loved me, that his whole being loved me. And I knew everyone in that class loved me. I wasn't embarrassed in front of them. I didn't feel like, I've just been shot down in front of my class. I knew that he was telling me something that I had to grow in, and it wasn't coming from I was less than. He knew who I was. I know he knew who he was. And he was speaking from love, but he was also saying you need to grow. He was speaking truth to me, and that's what Nirvana always did. He always spoke truth with passion, not gently, but with so much love behind it. And that, to me, is this marriage of Mother, Father, God, of the masculine and the feminine, of which we're here to continue to see in ourselves and nurture, to really nurture that caregiving, compassionate side of ourselves, the loving part for other people, to really want the best for them, to nurture them to grow up. And at the same time, our nurturing of other people doesn't mean we don't tell the truth. It doesn't mean, sometimes caregivers have a hard time seeing the truth because we want to make people feel good. That's what caregivers do, and that's not bad. But to be able to merge that with also telling the truth. I love you, I want you to feel good, and you need to do this work if you want people to hear you. If you want this result, you have to do the work. What a gift to have someone tell us the truth about who we are, not from we're not enough, not because I think less of you, but it's because I love you so deeply. And for the other person to be able to receive that and know that has been given from a place of love as well as respect. So this to me is where we're working, is to marry these two qualities of caregiving, because caregiving and the warrior, being able to create boundaries. And then we look how all four of them, so in this 12 hero, these first four are the ego, which he talks about. We need to be solid in that before we start our journey. So the innocent person, the warrior's carrying, the innocent has the dream. I have a dream. If you hear it a lot in the Olympics, I had a dream when I was a kid. It's the warrior part of yourself that will carry out the dream, that will fight for that ideal that this innocent child has. But if the warrior has not done its orphan work, the warrior can often be a bully and will start beating yourself up. So the warrior, to be a really effective warrior, also has to have an ability to be compassionate and caring to the orphan side, to be honest about it. And we develop all these different sides. The caregiver needs to have the warrior side to be able to set boundaries. The caregiver needs to be in touch with their own wounds so they're able to take care of themselves and not just project it all out there, but take care of themselves. And the caregiver needs, most importantly, to know what their dreams are, to not be so focused on what other people's needs are that you forget your own dreams, and to nurture those. So do you see how all four of these work really, really well together? It's really solid. It's rich, isn't it? So my invitation this week is to look at all of this, not to do it, to really be with all these four archetypes, these patterns, and see how you are with them in your life now, how maybe you've grown through them. But also when you hear stories on the news or the Olympics, there's a gazillion stories. If you're seeing a movie or reading a book, just hearing your family. I mean, I go and I'm like, oh, this is my, different people. So it's because we learn from other people. Like I grew up with warriors, but I wasn't a natural warrior, so I learned from them. Find out who are the natural people at these different stages, and what can we learn from them, and what maybe could they grow in. So let it be a really rich and full week as you're exploring these four archetypes. And then next week we're going to move on to the journey, which is the seeker, and we'll start with the seeker and the lover. So how you feeling? Good. You with me? Yeah. Thank you. It's great to be with you, and so fun to be with all of you. Let's pray. And how wonderful it is to turn within to that wonderful presence that is all of this and more than we could ever possibly articulate. This beautiful presence that is in, through, and as all creation, all forms, all qualities of God, all archetypes of God, all patterns of God. It is all of it and beyond. All words, all forms, all phenomena, our fingers pointing at the moon, but never the moon. And how grateful I am to know this thing itself is our very breath. It is closer to us than our hands and our feet. It is the very isness of who we are. And that it is impossible to ever be outside of this isness, this purity of being, this thing itself, which I call God. No matter what the situation or circumstances in our life, the conditions, the relationships, the finances, the emotions, the thoughts, the actions, no matter what is happening, we are never, ever outside of this one power and this one presence. That is an impossibility. It is always, always who and what we are. And how grateful I am to know that as this is the truth, we can simply rest in that we all have hit the mother lode because we are all made in the image and the likeness of pure spirit. We are the life of God right now. We are its fullness. We are all these divine archetypes, and as we get to play with them this week, we discover the beauty and the power in all of them and discover all the magnificence that we are as individuals expressing these beautiful archetypes. That each and every one of us is a beautiful flower, a beautiful expression of this oneness. There is no one on this planet that can reveal God in the way that each one in this room and on this planet does. Every person, every life form is a unique expression and essential for us to know the fullness and the wholeness of what God is. And so now we just take a moment to hold in our heart. If you want to say their name out loud, you can, or you can hold that presence in your heart. Anyone who you know in your life is needing prayer today. Start with yourself, and then hold anyone else you know needs this consciousness here today. How grateful I am for the power and the presence that has heard these names and has responded even before they were ever called. God is here and answering all requests beyond what we can even know. I give thanks to love itself, the fulfillment of these prayer requests, the fulfillment of our life here on earth, the fulfillment of every breath of every day, of every year of our life. To God be the glory. I release this word, I let it be, and I invite us all to say, and so it is. Amen.
And so it is. And so it is. And so